Hi, my name is Christian Cavallo, and I'm looking at sustainable practice for development of new Australian music theatre works. The keywords that I'm looking at today are creative development, or the key term, perhaps. Creative development refers to an early stage in the process of creation where exploration of ideas, decision making, problem solving, and applying knowledge work towards a goal of creating a new work. Through creative development process, artists and creative practitioners are able to explore possibilities for new works as they evolve concepts through early exploration and ideation. The term creative development now feels like somewhat of an institutionalized term. So to find the beauty in these words, I kind of go back to the original root of the word. So creative comes from the Latin root word creare, meaning to bring something into existence. And development comes from the old French word développer, meaning to unwrap or to unfold. We go back to these original meanings of the words, the original root words, bringing something into existence and unwrapping or unfolding something really gives this term a sense of beauty that I think we don't always identify it with. We often talk about the idea of going from page to stage, but we have to develop what's on the page first. So how do we go from this to this? And it does start with the development process. So I've come up with a plan for practice-based studio. As you can see here, I've divided this up into 10 stages. Some of these are going to feel repetitive, but I've intentionally done that so that collaborators will have a sense of repetition through the process. So stage one is for writing, where writers will have a scene or a song in accordance with the story that they're developing. Stage two is acting and observing. We'll be defining the scope of the creative development session. Is it a scene or a song or a lyric that you'll be interrogating? Consider the micro or the macro of what is being interrogated here as well. The new material is performed in front of creative collaborators who include directors, dramaturgs, musical directors. And we do want to limit just a little bit who's coming to these earlier stages of development. Sometimes having too many voices in the room can actually be to the detriment of the development. Stage three is reflecting. So we want to be able to reflect on the writing. Collaborators discuss the new material, considering a range of elements, including structure, clarity, originality, conciseness, dynamic, arrangement, musical composition, lyrics and storytelling, amongst a number of other things that need to be considered within the writing. Stage four is planning a change. So following reflection, the collaborators can identify any areas of the work that require change. The writer may set to work or to create or implement that change. The writer will then share the work with the creatives and collaborators who observe the changes and note the consequences of them in stage five. Together, the collaborators can consider a new material in relation to what existed before. Stage six is reflecting on these processes and consequences. A reflection takes place to determine whether the new material is stronger than what existed before. Does the new material achieve the intended purpose of change? Does the process need to occur again? Stage seven, we're replanning. If deemed necessary to create change again, the collaborators may replan their intended change and reflect on how to achieve a stronger outcome than had previously been created. Stage eight, acting and observing the process of and consequences of change. So we're sort of repeating this action. Stage nine, we're reflecting on these processes and consequences. Again, reflecting to determine whether the new material is stronger than what existed before. And then we're asking, does the new material achieve the intended purpose of change? Does this process need to occur again? And then I've given permission for stages 7 to 9 to be repeated again so that the collaborators know that there's no point where we need to stop this work. It can continue until the work feels like it achieves what we need it to. And then in stage 10, we're documenting. So once new material is created and the creative collaborators are content with it, the new material can be recorded in a master copy of the script or libretto, ready for a future workshop with an extended group of creative collaborators, including performers, accompanists, and more. So here's a creative development that I prepared earlier. Here I am with much longer hair, sitting around a table, engaging in creative development. We were looking at writing stages in particular through these moments. You can see I've got a script or a book in hand. In this photo, you can see the creative development is a musical one. And look, you'll notice that I'm in the lovely studios at Geelong Arts Centre here. But nonetheless, having people sitting around a room discussing, interrogating the work, sometimes just pen and paper, and sometimes creative development just looks like having a stretch and a ponder and maybe finding a random pose to feel comfortable in for a minute. Here I have an example of a song. It's called The Two of Us, and this is just to outline the process of writing and rewriting and sharing that work and interrogating that work. So the song is called The Two of Us. Nadia is in bed, restless and unable to sleep. She sits up startled in the bed and she starts to sing about an experience. You can see what we've done here is highlight various issues that we've found in the song once we've shared it. So we have some problems in these lyrics being structural. Some of the problems are relate to non-naturalistic speech. Some are just clarity, and some relate to storytelling. So, for example, rhyming becomes an issue. We have the rhyme feeling rhyming with breathing, and that doesn't quite work. The better solve is just to rewrite the not so clever rhyme. Likewise, when we look at non-naturalistic speech in blue here, you can see expressions like the total silence of it. Up in my head, I'm almost weeping, calling a mum mother, and fear is tightening. Now, a lot of these issues come from trying to get the song out quickly, trying to capture the idea of the song that you want to write, and coming up with rhymes in a moment while trying to get a structure and trying to get a sense of a song down. And so it is useful to come back to written work after you've had a chance to sit with it. So clarity here, you can see the word times. Night times frightening was the lyric. But it becomes a little bit unclear when you sing it. And then in purple, you can just see this line here, I struggle breathing, is underlined. We identified that as something that could point to having a panic attack. And it is an anxious moment, but we weren't quite wanting to say that this character was having a panic attack. So again, we decided that we'd have to readdress that word. So when I move forward, you can see our new verse. Lying here at night gives me the most uneasy feeling. Swirling thoughts unwind around my mind and I am reeling. So we've rewritten it, we've reassessed the rhyming structure of it, and then instead of having night times frightening, we've got nighttime scares me. It still fits the rhythmic nature of the verse that's being created, but at the same time it gets rid of the conjunction issue. Other things that we've rectified in here, existential dread inside my head. I feel it creeping. We address the mother and we've called her Ma, which feels a bit more colloquial. And then we've got nighttime scares me, dear God, spare me, which is maybe not the most clever rhyme, but it addresses the issue of fear is tightening, which we really didn't like upon reflection. So you can do this process with lyrics, then you probably want to do it with music. You can do it with any of the elements that come into the music theatre space, but it feels most obvious with lyric. So hopefully that example has been useful. From putting the process into practice, I learnt that I was able to follow clear steps in terms of how to approach the work of being in creative development for new music theatre works. Oftentimes it can be hard to know where to start or what the next step should be or who to involve and when. The plan for practice-based studio outlines the initial activity that can begin the process of development. It also suggests the type of creative collaborators that should be welcome in the early stages of creative development. Oftentimes we can bring in too many viewpoints too early, or even the wrong kinds of creatives into the room at earlier stages, which means that the lenses that are considering the work in its earlier stages may not be appropriate or useful. Sometimes collaborators, especially new ones, need to be given permission to interrogate work. It can also be daunting to suggest or request changes or rewrites of a writer's work. And having these clear steps laid out as part of the plan both set an expectation that this work should occur, as well as normalizes and gives permission to the collaborators to engage in this work. By engaging in an analysis and witnessing a progress of the work by reverting back to the original writing, we can also highlight positives and successes within the work being conducted. By stating that steps 7 to 9 are repeatable, we also give the collaborators permission to keep working until they're content with the work and where it eventually lands. When I take into consideration that the verse we'd originally written was unrefined and not nearly as well crafted as it could be, I also have to understand that it was written while the idea of a song was still forming, taking into consideration rhyme and rhythm and a bigger song structure, trying to capture a moment and a range of a character's feelings and observations. But in highlighting the verse itself outside the context of the song and the scene that it lives in, we're able to consider the lyrics alone and focus solely on the expression contained within them. We're able to recognize that there are some common issues found with this text. In considering these issues one by one, we're able to ensure that each line of the song was better considered. Being able to share this with a close group of collaborators and have a number of voices interrogate the original work led to a more considered and stronger writing in our rewritten version of the verse. We learned that having clear expectations around the creative development process from the outset enhanced our ability to begin interrogation of the work and allowed us to jump in more readily than we otherwise might have. In future, I would actually send this plan out to collaborators before meeting for a gathered creative development session so that they can be aware of the plan before we begin and come to the session feeling empowered to interrogate and create positive change within the work in progress. Being clear about the scope of work to be looked at within the creative development is highly useful. Different people will have different expectations going into the development based on their own experiences in similar contexts. But having clarity around the scope of the development session will help productivity. Likewise, being open about process, about rewriting, and permission to repeat steps unlimited times ensures that all the collaborators have the same expectations and are able to align with respect to approaches and modes of working.